Everyone for having me today. I just wanted to provide you with an overview of patient-focused drug development, or PFDD. And as part of that, I'll talk a little bit about the PFDD meetings. I wanted to talk a little bit about patient-focused drug development, why it began, how it's evolved, and how PFDD meetings and other patient engagement activities fit within the broader initiative of PFDD. So I'm going to begin with some background about FDA. That context is really kind of important for understanding what FDA can do to support the development of treatments and how information from patients and families can contribute to that process. First, I wanted to orient you to FDA's structure because FDA is not a single medical product program. FDA actually has three medical product centers: the Center for Devices and Radiologic Health, which oversees medical devices, the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and they oversee products that include vaccines, blood products, and cell therapies and gene therapies. And then, of course, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, which oversees most drugs. And I am in the Center for, for Drug Evaluation and Research, or CDER. So much of what I discussed today will come from the drug development perspective. However, patient engagement and patient-focused development activities occur across all three of our medical product centers. Some related activities are also coordinated through the Office of the Commissioner. Which part of FDA is involved depends on the type of medical product that is being developed. It's also important to understand FDA's role in medical product development. FDA does not discover or develop drugs, and FDA does not conduct the clinical trials used to determine whether a potential treatment is safe and effective. Those activities are generally undertaken by medical product developers, academic researchers, clinical investigators, and other organizations. FDA also cannot require a company to develop a treatment for a particular condition. Even when that condition is serious, there are few or no available treatments, and the unmet need is profound. The decision to begin and continue a development program really ultimately rests with the developer. But at the same time, FDA actively works to support and advance medical product development, particularly for serious conditions and rare diseases. We can help provide scientific and regulatory advice through development. Early interaction with FDA can help developers identify important scientific questions, understand the evidence that will be needed, and avoid preventable problems that could delay a program. We also administer incentives established under the Orphan Drug Act. We support research through programs that fund rare disease clinical trials, natural history studies, and work involving rare neurodegenerative diseases. We issue guidance documents to address common development challenges. We participate in public-private partnerships, bring patients and scientific experts together, and support work on biomarkers, outcome measures, and other tools that can make drug development more feasible. Obviously, none of FDA's activities can guarantee that a developer will pursue a treatment or that potential treatment will ultimately be shown to be safe and effective. But these activities can help reduce avoidable uncertainty, address scientific barriers, and help promising development programs move forward. So while we are an important part of the development ecosystem, but progress really requires patients, researchers, developers, funders, clinicians, and regulators to contribute all of their respective expertise. And so with that background, let me turn to patient-focused drug development, or PFDD. At its core, PFDD is about making sure that the experiences and priorities of patients are considered as treatments are developed and evaluated. Clinical information can tell us a great deal about a disease, but it may not really fully tell us what it's like to live with that disease, which effects are most disruptive, and what kinds of improvement would make a meaningful difference in patients' lives. That information can come from patients and families in many ways, including through meetings, listening sessions, surveys, registries, natural history studies, and other research. PFDD is also not something that FDA can accomplish alone. Researchers and medical product developers need to seek patient input and use it when making decisions about their development programs. For a rare condition, this can be especially important because patients and families may hold knowledge about the condition that is not well captured in the published literature. Shows how FDA's patient-focused drug development work began and then expanded. You'll see PDUFA 5 on the slide, and that refers to a 5-year set of commitments related to FDA's drug review program. As part of those commitments, FDA agreed to develop a more structured framework for assessing benefit risk of drugs. As part of that effort, FDA recognized and heard very clearly from patients that benefit risk assessment requires a strong understanding of the therapeutic context. And by therapeutic context, I mean understanding what it's like to live with a condition, how the condition impacts the daily life, what treatment options are available, and what important unmet needs remain. To help FDA better understand that context, we committed to holding 24 meetings, each focused on a particular disease or condition. And these meetings became the FDA-led PFDD meetings. The interest from patient communities was greater than FDA could accommodate through those 24 meetings. And so those, plus the externally led PFDD meetings that I'll talk about in a minute, also reinforced something broader. We heard from patients that their perspectives could improve many decisions made earlier in drug development, not only decisions made at the time FDA's benefit risk assessment was completed. For example, if a clinical trial measure of an outcome that does not reflect if a clinical trial measures an outcome that does not reflect something meaningful to patients, it's too late to change that after the trial has been completed. That recognition helped FDA grow, or PFDD grow, beyond meetings, and for FDA to encourage that these meetings happen much earlier in the drug development process. And so to support the earlier incorporation of the patient perspective into drug development, we also then began developing a series of guidance documents addressing how to collect patient input, determine what measures or what matters to patients, develop dependable ways to measure those outcomes, and use those measures in clinical trials. But the work didn't stop with guidance documents. In 2019, we launched the Standard Core Clinical Outcome Assessment Grant Program. That program supports work to develop publicly available sets of outcome assessments that can be considered across development programs in a particular disease. We also continued to hear that important methodologic questions remained. So in 2023, we issued a request for information asking stakeholders to identify challenges they were encountering when trying to collect and use patient experience data. Beginning in 2024, we held public meetings to discuss those challenges and possible approaches for addressing them. The later commitments shown on the slide reflect the continuation of this work. So while PFDD meetings were initially established to strengthen FDA's understanding of the therapeutic context for reviewing applications for new drugs, we came to recognize that their value is really much, much broader. When this information is available earlier, it can inform decisions about what developers study, what they measure, and how clinical trials are designed. It can also inform the discussions developers have with FDA as part of the development process. And that gives patient input the opportunity to have a more substantial impact. With that broader history in mind, I want to take a look more closely now at how PFDD meetings work. There are two types of PFDD meetings shown here. FDA-led PFDD meetings are planned and conducted by FDA. Externally led PFDD meetings are planned and conducted by patient organizations using the FDA-led meeting model. In both cases, patients and caregivers are the central voices. FDA staff, medical product developers, researchers, clinicians, and others have an opportunity to listen. These are condition-specific meetings. They're not designed to discuss a particular investigational product or to advocate for a particular regulatory outcome. Their purpose is to gather the broad picture of the patient experience in a particular disease or condition. As the slide shows, FDA has conducted more than 30 of the FDA-led PFDD meetings, and externally led meetings have allowed many, many more patient communities to participate in this type of structured engagement. The next slide shows the types of information that these meetings are designed to gather. So the discussion generally covers several broad areas. First, which symptoms or effects of the condition have the greatest impact on patients' lives, including the activities that have become difficult or impossible. Second, how well current treatment approaches address those problems and what burdens or limitations patients experience with those treatments. Third, what patients would want from a future treatment, including what kinds of improvements would be meaningful. The discussion may also explore factors patients consider when deciding whether to use a treatment or participate in a clinical trial. These questions may sound straightforward, but the answers can reveal information that is not apparent from laboratory findings, medical records, or published research. Patient organizations often ask how FDA and medical product developers use this information. FDA meets with developers at multiple times during development. What we hear through PFDD meetings may help inform the discussions between FDA and the developers about drug development plans, who should be included in a study, what should be measured, and what participants will be asked to do. FDA reviewers may also refer developers to the publicly available meeting reports so that they can better understand patient priorities and unmet needs. Developers, of course, obviously, or also use this information independently. After FDA's PFDD meeting on long COVID, for example, a clinical trialist told me that what she heard during the meeting led her to make changes on a trial protocol that she was developing. That's just one example of how information gathered through a meeting can influence development while decisions can still be changed. The information also continues to be available after the meeting through a written report. For an FDA-led PFDD meeting, FDA prepares a Voice of the Patient report. For an externally led meeting, the patient organization prepares and publishes its own report. FDA maintains this webpage so that those reports, along with summaries from patient listening sessions, can be found in one place. The information is organized by condition so that FDA reviewers, medical product developers, researchers, clinicians, patient organizations, patients, and families can locate it. The report allows information gathered during a single event to remain available for future research and development work. They can also help someone who is new to a disease area gain an initial understanding of what patients and families have identified as important. Because this page contains both PFDD meeting reports and patient listening summaries, I wanted to take a moment to explain the distinction between those two types of engagement. Let me go back now. This slide is really comparing an externally led PFDD meeting with a patient listening session requested by a patient organization. Both begin with a request from the patient community, and both provide an opportunity for patients, caregivers, and advocates to speak directly about their experiences. The principal differences are the size, the audience, and the type of public record that is created. An externally led PFDD meeting lasts longer and is a public event. It may include hundreds of participants, and again, generally lasts several hours. The people listening may include FDA and other government agencies, medical product developers, researchers, and healthcare professionals. A patient listening session is smaller, private, and generally lasts about an hour. The primary audience is FDA staff, and the number of patient and caregiver participants is limited. An externally led PFDD meeting generally follows a structured set of questions about symptoms, daily impacts, and current treatment approaches and unmet needs, as we just discussed. A listening session can cover similar topics, but may be more flexible and reflect the issues the community most wants FDA to understand. Both are non-regulatory. They are not meetings at which FDA makes decisions about a medical product. Specific medical products, including products that are still being studied, are generally outside of the scope of both externally led PFDD meetings and patient-requested listening sessions. An externally led PFDD meeting results in a public report. After a patient-requested listening session, the requesting organization may prepare a public summary. Neither approach is inherently better than the other. The choice depends on the purpose of the engagement, who needs to hear the information, how the community hopes it will be used, and really the resources available to plan the meetings. The meetings and listening sessions I have described are important, but they are really only one part of patient-focused drug development. Patient input can contribute to many different decisions throughout development. It can help researchers and developers identify which outcomes and burdens matter most to patients, can help them design studies that are more realistic and less burdensome. It can help determine what changes should be measured and what patients would consider a meaningful treatment benefit. It can also identify study procedures that may discourage people from participating or make it difficult for patients and families to remain in a study. Developers can use patient input to design trials that are more acceptable to the people being asked to participate, which may support recruitment and retention. Patient input can also come from sources other than meetings. Registries, natural history studies, interviews, surveys, and other research can all contribute different types of information. The method should be selected based on the question that needs to be answered and how that information will be used. As I said before, patient input is most useful when it's available early, But when that's not possible, bringing it into the process as soon as practical is still better than not having the information at all. And so here you'll see the benefit risk framework that I mentioned earlier. When FDA reviews a drug, we consider what benefits the drug has shown, how important those benefits are, what risks or burdens are associated with the treatment, and how much uncertainty remains. We consider that evidence in the context of the condition being treated, including its seriousness, the effect that it has on patients, the treatments that are already available, and the remaining unmet need. Patient experience information does not replace the clinical evidence needed to demonstrate that a treatment is safe and effective, but it does help FDA understand the context in which that evidence should be evaluated. It may also help us to understand which benefits matter most to patients and the types of risks or trade-offs patients are willing to consider. The PFDD guidance series addresses how to collect and use patient input in a careful and credible way. The first guidance asks, who do we need to hear from? People with the same condition may have different experiences depending on their age, the severity of the condition, how long they've lived with it, their treatment history, communication needs, and other factors. We need to understand a range of experience and be transparent about whose voices were included. The second guidance asks, how do we determine what matters most to patients? That includes asking clear questions, avoiding questions that lead people towards a particular answer, and identifying patterns across what people tell us. The third guidance asks, how can we measure what matters? If fatigue, communication, mobility, or another aspect of daily life is important, researchers need a dependable way to measure it. And the fourth guidance asks, how should that measurement be used in a clinical trial? Together, the four guidances describe a progression, hear from patients, determine what matters, find an appropriate way to measure it, and then determine how that measurement can be used in a clinical trial. That is one way to see how the broader PFDD initiative builds on what we first learned through the meeting program. And so with that, I'm going to stop my presentation and I hope that you all have some questions for me. So I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Danny Dyke from the foundation. Thank you for joining us today. Question I've got, so we've done a patient listening session, and thank you for showing. Got some feedback. Sorry. So I'm trying to understand, since we've done the patient listening session, thinking about how we go into a PFDD and sort of optimize what we've already done there and what that next step looks like and how they sort of play with each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one, I knew that you all had done a patient listening session. And so that's why I included the slides, because I thought that might be questions. So, there are times where maybe you were earlier in drug development, maybe you were a smaller group, you didn't have the resources to do a PFDD meeting, so you did a listening session. So at least FDA kind of understood what was particularly important to the community. If that has changed, if the development landscape has changed and different things are important, that would be something that could be helpful to bring up in the PFDD meeting. But I think one of the values of the PFDD meeting itself is that it's able to be attended by larger group of patients, so that we hear from a larger group of patients. Anybody basically is able to call in and share their experience or participate in the meeting. I also think that another point that could be helpful is that it allows medical product developers to hear these conversations and take from those conversations information that will help to inform their drug development programs. And so I think that, as I said before, I think they both have their place, but for the PFDD meeting, I think one of the things that is really you'll be able to optimize is that helping drug developers and clinical trialists and others also understand the condition and your lived experiences with it.
Okay, thank you. So I guess just a quick follow-up to that then, is there a right time to, and I'm looking across the room at Ashley because maybe she's already thought through this, but is there a right time for us to be thinking about that engagement? Like, is there a spot where it's too soon, or when should we be thinking about that engagement?
So from an FDA perspective, I would say that we want the engagement as soon as possible so that we really do, and we want medical product developers to have that information as they're starting to develop products or think about developing products. And so, because one of the things that we've heard is that the PFDD meetings can also help identify maybe targets for therapy. And by targets, I don't mean like gene therapy targets, but more symptoms that people didn't know about, or things like that might be drug developers might be interested in developing a therapy for. Now, from a practical perspective, sometimes these meetings are sponsored by drug companies who want to be able to get that information. And so I think once drug development has begun and there's companies that are kind of moving in the space, you're more likely to be able to get some sponsorship for the PFDD meetings. We avoid what we would consider conflict of interest by ensuring that if a meeting is sponsored, it is done in such a way that the sponsoring organization or company does not have input into selecting panelists or setting the agenda or anything like that, but they still are able to help offset the cost of such a meeting.
Thank you.